Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Your Mark on the World show. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe. I'm a Forbes contributor covering social entrepreneurship and impact investing. And our guest today is Maura Bolis. She's a senior advisor at Oxfam. Maura, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, we're thrilled to have an opportunity to talk to you. Not only does Oxfam do impact investing, but you're also active in the community as an expert and as an observer. And so you have some really interesting insights that you recently put together in a discussion paper for Oxfam. And I'm interested in talking through some of those key insights.
Absolutely.
I think fundamentally, your thesis is that we must be looking at impact investing with an impact-first mentality. Isn't that, at least at the highest possible level, a summary of your observations?
I think just to put a slight spin on that is to say, I think impact is a pretty diluted term at this point. So I would say a view to poverty alleviation, poverty eradication, that should be our sort of organizing principle.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight. And I think a lot of impact investors in the early days observed that. Mm-hmm. As you point out in your paper, a lot of the early participants in impact investing were philanthropists, mm-hmm. Rich individuals, some foundations that were making program-related investments. And so those early days, it was driven by a philanthropic model. Mm-hmm. But I think you pointed out that some 85% or so of investors today are looking for fully risk-adjusted market rate returns. Mm-hmm. Can you get fully risk-adjusted market rate returns and have impact?
So I think I would answer it this way. I am all for socially responsible investing. I am all for ESG investing. I wish that was the norm. That and only that was the norm. That said, I don't think that's impact investing. And as we go further to blurring the lines between these three areas of work and pots of money, I think we constrain the field of available resources for the entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, and other really socially minded businesses that have poverty alleviation in their DNA. We limit the resources for those institutions. And I think we're starting in the wrong place. I think that so many, as the field goes mainstream, the focus has really been on meeting the needs of the investors and what the investors require, rather than starting with the focus on the problem that we're focused on, a diagnosis of the constraints around that problem, and then building up from there, right? Building a financial product that then is built off of that analysis, rather than starting point being what is the rate of return that's going to be required to attract investors. We're starting in the wrong place.
Yeah, interesting observation. Now, it's as I think about the world today, and as I think about poverty alleviation, one of the concerns I have is the disproportionate effect that climate change seems to be having on poor countries, poor communities around the world, where they don't have the resources to build a barrier to the, a $10 billion gate like they're doing in Florence or in Italy. Anyway, but when people are doing environmentally friendly projects, especially climate change oriented projects like renewable energy, they're putting up windmills and they're putting up solar farms. Should they get a pass on their impact that those projects have on local communities that may be directly affected?
It's such an interesting question. And I couldn't agree with you more that the disproportionate negative impact of climate change is suffered by the people with the fewest resources to absorb those negative impacts. So I absolutely agree. That said, I absolutely believe that there should not be a pass. For me, impact investing is very focused on the intentionality and the business processes that happen both at the enterprise level as well as at the fund level. So what I want to see more of is a new economy, a new human economy that's built around addressing those needs and using business as a vehicle, and then investment to behave differently in order to support such enterprises. To me, this is a different area of work, and it's one which impact investing should be focusing. I think that there are obviously huge positive externalities of the work around solar panels in the United States of America. But do I see that as immediately positive in terms of a poverty alleviation mandate? No, I see it as a positive externality, just like a cell phone tower, just like a hotel project that can employ people. Unless I see a change thesis that links to an improvement for people living in poverty, other marginalized populations, I don't personally see it in the bucket as fitting within impact investing.
How does a project in the developing world, and I'm sure there are a lot of projects like this, right, where they're relatively small utility scale solar projects going in all across the continent of Africa and across India and other places in the developing world, where you see 1 to 5 megawatt projects going in to feed power onto the grid. Those seem to me to be the projects where there is the most potential for them to do both good and harm. What are you seeing? Have you observed anything in that specific area?
I don't know if I'll be able to talk that specifically to yes, I have observed some things, but just I think it gets me to a point that I'd like to raise in the circumstance is, again, that this is really about, for me, it's really about a design question, right? And how are we starting? So the extent to which impact investing is developing itself around the needs of the social enterprises and the benefits and the risks of people living in poverty, and extrapolating from there to come up with funds and financial products that best mitigate, that best serve kind of that core principle, right? By which it is to say, I think at this point, it's assumed that projects like those are inherently beneficial, because I don't think that we're doing that upfront work to do the really important diagnostic analysis of the problem and of the stakeholders who are involved in the problem, to really understand the full impact of that work. And I don't think that, exactly as you point out, I don't think that a project such as you described should be considered inherently positive. We haven't looked beyond the surface enough, and it's because we're not doing enough of an investigation at that enterprise level and at that stakeholder level of people who are supposedly benefiting. So I guess it's a call for more research, more independent research in particular, looking at what are the needs, what are the constraints, what are the risks at the enterprise level and at the stakeholder level, and then building up from there in terms of how can impact investing best serve that population.
Yeah. Now, Oxfam itself does some impact investing. Can you describe a little bit about what investments or what process Oxfam is using and the lessons that you take away from that?
Well, I'm very glad that you asked that, because I think this is illustrative of the point that I've been making. The work that I do at Oxfam, I'm global lead on a fund called Women in Small Enterprise. And the fund itself is funded by impact investors. There's philanthropic capital that helps with training, with the training component and some operational expenses. But what predated the fund was a deep analysis into understanding women's economic marginalization in Central and Latin America, right? So before the fund was set up, what we did was we did a research process that involved both myriad stakeholders, both field builders in the impact investing and SME development space, academics. We had roundtables with women entrepreneurs in Central and Latin America. We worked with NGOs and other sort of supporting organizations in the field in order to understand what were the main constraints that they were facing, right? Where were their priorities, right? Then we took from there and we started to do one of the things that we found was that you may or may not know this, but access to collateral for women, access to loans for women entrepreneurs is hindered by the collateral requirements that they're asked to put up, right? Mm-hmm. And there is a gender lens to this. Often women are asked to put up more collateral, women-run businesses are asked to put up more collateral than their male counterparts. In fact, in Guatemala, where we launched, women report having to put up almost twice the collateral requirement as their male counterparts, right? This in a country where women own 13% of the land, okay?
Yeah.
You start with that diagnosis of the problem, and then you build an impact investing fund that addresses that problem. So what our impact investing fund does, it's a loan guarantee facility. We work with a local financial institution, which has launched, according to them, the first women-run small business lending product that's teamed with a training component in Guatemala. So not micro, but small business. Mm-hmm. And we reduce the collateral requirement that women have to put up in order to become eligible for the loans by 50%, right?
Fantastic.
So you build up from there, and then when you find when you're looking at the financial modeling is the revenues that are made through the guarantee fees are modeled out basically as capital preservation at the end of the fund's 10-year life. Okay.
Sure.
But we didn't start with this is the interest rate this is the rate of return that we can promise to our investors. Let's go figure out what we can grub up that meets that rate of return. It started with a diagnosis from the problem and input from the entrepreneurs, and then build up from there.
I see. And is it working?
It's taken some twists and turns, and at this point, we are doing very nicely. We have developed, as I said, this partnership with a cooperative savings and loan institution in Guatemala. We're making loans that average around $17,000, which for women-run small businesses in rural Guatemala is a sizable loan. It is certainly not microfinance. At this point, we're up to, I believe, 29 loans, again, with an average of around $17,000. And they're longer rates than they would otherwise have been able, longer loan terms. So we're looking at 1 to 4 year loans that are being issued for capital, for working capital, for equipment, et cetera, for women to really take their businesses to the next level. And it's really dependent upon the buy-in of the financial institution, which has helped co-create. And in fact, Oxfam is not visible in the process. It is all entirely marketed and led by the local financial institution.
What kind of rates of return are you getting?
So that will be calculated at the end of the fund's 10-year life, but at this point we haven't had any losses. So
well, that's good. So in theory, you should have a good positive return if you're not experiencing much in the way of losses.
That's right. I mean, at this point, what the modeling works out at is basically as long as the default rate stays below the returns that are generated from both the deposit interest that we get in terms of holding the deposit in Guatemala and the guarantee fees that we earn off of our percentage of the guarantee coverage, then we should be in good shape. But you can see that it's a very different type of an investor-investee dynamic. And I think one that I'd like to get to in terms of your initial points around philanthropic capital, for so long, what we had as our disposable we had as our disposal to make change and to alleviate poverty was money that was just one-way money, right? It was money out. It was a grant.
Right.
You could get a tax deduction if you were in the U.S., but it was pretty pure vanilla. At this point, we have incredible heterogeneity, both of types of instruments as well as types of enterprises and businesses that can create social good. And by virtue of the entrance of more mainstream actors, rather than interrogating and building and supporting that heterogeneity, there's a real fear that the entire space will get hijacked and pulled into more conventional investing, just as so much important, rich work is happening at the space that's between kind of return of capital and low single-digit returns. And so I think there are outsized expectations at this point, which could constrain basically access to that area, but also I think really limit the impact of these billions of dollars that's going into impact investing on the poverty alleviation mandate.
Yeah. Well, we've just got a few minutes left. Let me ask you just a couple of personal questions to help understand you a little bit better. So I admire you. I know countless other people do as well, but who do you look up to as a role model?
So this is going to possibly sound a little cheesy, but who I look up to as a role model and who inspires me are really the women entrepreneurs that we work with in Guatemala, because I know that I am, as a working mom with a demanding career and demanding family life, I know how hard it is to manage the balance of work pressures and family pressures. And then I go to Guatemala and I meet with a woman entrepreneur who runs a driving school in Guatemala. And she takes a day out of her week in order to serve in her community, helping to run a cooperative daycare center for impoverished women in her community. And she does this while running a sizable small business. And it's women who have broken through the norms and the expectations that have been set of them to demonstrate that they're able to do something that no one expects them to do. In fact, they often get questioned for trying to do. And then not only that, but give back to their communities. I fundamentally believe that women are natural social entrepreneurs. That is just what I believe. And I think, in fact, putting more of a gender, so it's these women who I've met through my work at Oxfam, who have broken through the expectations in order to prove themselves. The fact that they get questioned and they're asked to put up twice the collateral requirements of their male counterparts, it's so stifling of their abilities and their creativity. I'm just inspired by them all the time.
I certainly appreciate that. You are a bright, extraordinarily capable person. You could be doing anything. Why have you devoted yourself to Oxfam and your career in impact and international development?
I think it goes back to this appreciation and respect and awe, really, of the capabilities of people who are undervalued and societally. And we at Oxfam have a privileged position of having an opportunity to have an interview with you, of speaking in different fora. And I see myself as a lucky conduit to bring kind of the voices and the experiences of women such as the ones that we've supported in Guatemala to these rarefied spaces so that they can be better served and get the respect that they deserve. And that's really what drives me, is the passion for to act in service of and in respect of their capabilities.
That's fantastic. Well, I'm so grateful that you would take the time to be with us today. One last question, though. What is your superpower?
Well, I can fly.
Good.
I can. No, that I haven't achieved flight yet. But I think my superpower is my passion and my enthusiasm, which it gives me a courage that I sometimes didn't realize that, or earlier in my life I didn't realize that I had, so bringing and I think that allows me to speak out in ways that maybe other people feel like they would be held back to calling out some of these failings that I see. And I do it because I think it comes from kind of the core mission of Oxfam in terms of righting the wrong, that has so ignited my passion for this work and in this field.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate that and am inspired by the great things that you're doing. Before you go, tell us how people can find your discussion paper, learn more about impact investing through Oxfam, and how they can connect with you personally.
So the discussion paper is on the Oxfam America website, and it is called Impact Investing, Who Are We Serving? And there's also a blog that I wrote to accompany it, which is on Next Billion, and it's called In the Rush to the Mainstream, Who Are We Leaving Behind? And in terms of how to contact me, my email address is mbolis@oxfamamerica.org. And I can also provide more information about the different areas of work that we do in impact investing across the different affiliates, Oxfam affiliates. I just gave the example of the initiative that I've been most intimately involved in, but we have various initiatives that really go to this core that I've been trying to emphasize in terms of starting at that enterprise level and that stakeholder level and working up from there in terms of trying to direct appropriate capital to where it's needed most.
Fantastic. Well, Maura, thank you so much for being with us today. We wish you every success in the great work that you're doing.
Thank you.
All righty, let's do some good.